A time of turmoil? Or a surprising historical moment? The movement for women's rights? The movement for Black lives? The movement for clean energy? All these intersect in a group of groundbreaking political campaigns. Some remarkable citizens are stepping forward to reverse our state's backward legacy on health, justice, and the environment. This evening celebrates their candidacy and the larger movement for racial and environmental justice behind them. Let's meet them now. Marquita Bradshaw, Democratic nominee for Tennessee Senator. Renee Hoyos, running in Tennessee's 2nd Congressional District. Blair Walsingham, running in Tennessee's 1st Congressional District. Elizabeth Rowland, running for Tennessee State House District 16. Jay Clark, running for Tennessee State House District 8. Virginia Couch, running for Tennessee State House District 18. Gloria Johnson, running for re-election for Tennessee State House District 13. Jane George, running for Tennessee State Senate District 6. Hey, welcome back to part 2 of our 2-part event honoring Sierra Club endorsed candidates. I'm Kent Minow with the Sierra Club's Harvey Broom Group, and tonight we'll be talking to Jay Clark, Jane George, Virginia Couch, and Elizabeth Rowland, as well as an additional conversation with Marquita Bradshaw. Now, they'll be talking to some remarkable citizens about the thorniest problems hitting our state. Economic problems like job loss, wealth inequality, and eviction. Health problems like the opioid epidemic, hospital closures, and the underfunding of Medicaid. Environmental injustice that hits communities near urban Superfund sites as well as near rural coal ash impoundments. From the COVID pandemic to the climate crisis, these problems make a livable future seem a long way off. Yet each of these candidates has detailed plans to help people who need it and get Tennessee on the rise. So let's jump right in and hear what they have to say. If we all listened to our artists and our scientists, we'd always know who to vote for. Our next conversation is with a man who's both. Jay Clark is a masterful Appalachian songwriter and musician, as well as a biology professor at Maryville College. Both roles illustrate the tremendous value he'll bring to the 8th District as its representative in Nashville. So let's listen to a rousing conversation between Jay and Blount County Commissioner Jackie Hill, which helps me imagine a future without racism. And then he'll sing a song, which tells about the musical tradition behind what we're doing here today.
Hey everybody, I'm sitting on the back porch again for scrappy time wearing my brand new Jay Clark for Tennessee mask. If you pay attention here in the near future, you'll find out how you can get one. I'm also sitting here with a great friend of mine, a Blount County Commissioner and a hero to all of us, Miss Jackie Hill. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, Jay. Thanks for asking.
Well, you look great in that mask, I have to say.
Hey, I love it. I'm going to take this home with me, okay?
Yes, ma'am. You're
All
welcome
right.
to as many as you would like.
Okay.
So I appreciate you coming all the way out here to Rockford today. I know this is outside your district, technically.
Yes.
But tell us a little bit about you, like where you grew up and your roots.
Well, I am a Blount Countyan. I was born and raised in Alcoa, Tennessee. And once I graduated from high school, I went to Charles Martin Hall School. It was segregated. And once I left Charles M. Hall, I went to Tennessee State University, where I got a bachelor's in chemistry. And then I went to the University of Michigan, where I got a master's in chemistry. And then Kodak hired me right out of the university. And I think after being there for about a couple of years, they sent me to the executive development program, where I got an MBA, courtesy of Kodak.
So saying that you were here in a segregated high
Yes,
school situation,
yes.
what, I think a lot of folks don't realize that wasn't that long ago.
Oh, no,
and,
no, yes.
The younger generations, including my own. Where I grew up, we had a segregated high school that was converted into where I went to kindergarten.
Oh,
and I
okay.
only knew the history of that because
Yeah.
I had gone to that school. But
Yeah.
can you tell us just a little bit
Well,
about that?
there's a lot of confusion when they talk about institutional racism. And when I think of that, I think of my childhood doing the 1 through 12, grades at Charles M. Hall. Because as long as I attended Charles M. Hall, for as long as I attended, we never purchased any new books. We always got books that were last used at Alcoa School. They sent them over when they bought new books, so we got the old books. That to me is institutional racism, because I don't think there was a strategy or plan to do that, but by the fact that we were always behind, whether it was the furniture, whether it was the books or whatever, we always got the leftovers. To me, that's institutional racism. Not that you intentionally did it, to keep us at a certain level, but the results of that was when I graduated, I knew that my education was not what it would have been if I had attended an integrated school.
Or simply just been a different color?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean-
One of the other things that happened while I attended high school here, I graduated salutatorian of our class. And usually the Alcoa plant, the Alcoa Aluminum Company of America plant, would always give a scholarship to the valedictorian and the salutatorians of every high school. And they did that in Alcoa religiously. However, the scholarship that they gave to the white school was $1,000, and what they gave to us was $300.
Wow.
Yeah, so those little things that people really don't think much about is the concept of what I call institutional racism. It was just the way things were done, and no one thought that there was a need to change them. So.
Was that something that you were really aware of?
Oh,
then,
absolutely.
At that age
Ooh,
and such?
absolutely. Well, even to this day, you have people driving in our neighborhoods. In our neighborhood, a predominantly black neighborhood, with a Confederate flag on the back of a truck.
And I'm sorry
Okay?
about that.
Yeah, and they know the significance of it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be driving up and down the streets.
Yeah.
So it's those kinds of things. And I think the issue with most African American isn't necessarily that you have to agree with every position we have, but that you should at least speak up. Don't want you in the streets, just speak up. And so, growing up in Blount County, a lot of opportunities that my parents had were as a result of some of their white friends, either folks they worked for, or whatever. So I was able to benefit from that. So there were lots of good people, white people in Blount County, but there were some that weren't so nice, and we tended to run into them too frequently, I think. I mean, if you want to talk about history, like the KKK, everybody goes, KKK, they weren't around here. Yes, they were, because they used to ride through my neighborhood, okay? And they didn't always come through and just drive through. they had guns, they burned crosses and all of that. Never hit the newspaper, all right? But that was going on in our little neighborhood of 13 streets. And I'm sure there were more people that knew about it, but no one said anything. So, but my mama always used to say, it's not what they do to you, it's what you do with what you got. And you better get as much as you can get.
Yeah, no kidding. So, all that said, I think it's important to point out that, you ran for office back in 2018, and you were elected to the county commission for District 1,
surprise.
correct?
Yes.
And you were the first person or first woman, African American woman on the commission. Is that correct?
So I am the first African American female to get elected.
Okay.
Yes.
I got you. Well, congratulations.
I was as surprised as everybody else was.
Well,
okay.
I don't think a lot of us were so surprised. I mean, if you're around, all you got to do if you don't know Jackie is watch this, and you can see her energy, and it's infectious, and I think it affects people in a positive way, and that's what we want on our county commission.
Sure.
What's been your experience?
One of the things that's been a positive of me being a commissioner is that people in the neighborhood, they'll come by and they go, hey, commish, that pothole or that road, that speeding coming down Hall Road. You get all of this input that they expect you to react to. Yeah. And that's been amazing, So I'm just hoping that now that people see somebody that looks like them as a part of government, that they'll become more engaged. That's the whole intent.
Yep.
And I try and emphasize that whenever I see anybody. You just don't vote for presidential election. You vote for every local election because it's impacting your life.
This song here kind of takes you back a little bit maybe, or at least that was the attempt, a little bit to some folk singers we had back in the days that were associated with movements, some political, really all of them. And Lord knows we need that right now. So this is called Mountain in the Sky. I climbed a mountain with Martin Luther King. He showed me things I'd never seen. We stood on a mountaintop and saw the promised land. And as we stood there, hand in hand, we sang, we shall overcome someday. I never wanted to leave top of a mountain, 'cause Lord knows I love to get high. I never wanted to leave the top of a mountain unless I was headed to the by and by, to that mountain in the sky. Sweet bye-bye. High upon the ridge, sitting close to a flame, with a fire and a bottle, it helped to warm my veins. And then out of the firs came a scrawny, skinny man. He had a cigarette in his mouth and a guitar in his hand, and he sang, this land is your land, this land is mine. I never wanted to leave the top of a mountain, 'cause Lord knows I love to get high. I never wanted to leave top of a mountain unless I was headed to the by and by, to that mountain in the sky, the sweet by and by. I watch the sun fall from a rock outcrop. The moon slowly rose and a valley filled with fog. And then I heard a commotion on the trail down below. Carbide lights were coming up the mountain, and they were led by Mother Jones singing, "Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on?" Never wanted to leave the top of the mountain, 'cause Lord knows I love to get high. Never wanted to leave the top of the mountain. This side is headed to the by-by, to that mountain in the sky, the sweet by-by.
When I first saw her speak, Jane George was on fire. She had the hardest-hitting rap about Medicaid expansion I'd heard. Tennessee has the highest rates of medical bankruptcy in the nation, and according to U.S. News and World Report, ranked 43rd in healthcare. And the outrageous part is that we've already paid for it. Our legislature won't open the door to Medicaid expansion, so tax money we've already spent can't return to us and provide 675,000 Tennesseans much-needed health care. Partisan politics is literally killing us. Healthcare, education, environment, why do we have to be last in everything? This passion shows here as she chats with Matthew Park, a candidate himself in the primary, about food deserts, agriculture, and the environment.
So let's talk about investing in communities a little bit. One of the big things for me that I see so often is we have a real problem with food deserts here, especially in Knoxville, in what should be considered an urban area. It's really hard for people to get good food. So, Burlington, for instance, has a Save-A-Lot. You don't get good high quality food from that grocery store, and it's still over a mile down to Kroger, which can be a real burden to people. So what do you think is the answer, maybe not for the whole country for food deserts, and maybe not even for the whole state, but if you were appropriating funds to do even a test pilot for overcoming food deserts right here in Knoxville, where would you start?
Well, I think one thing we can do is to give incentives to some of our local farmers. We have a lot of local farmers here. Now, they're not necessarily going to be able to year-round provide wholesome food because of our climate. But one of the biggest issues we have is that the majority of our agricultural production is in livestock. So we don't produce a lot of live food, certainly not on the commercial level. So I think we have to start incentivizing farmers who are willing to, one, make a smaller carbon footprint. That would be great if we could find ways to incentivize farmers who are interested in organic production of food. And we need to start producing more whole living food. And by that, of course, I'm talking about vegetables and fruits and things other than livestock production. So that's one way to do it. The other way is to support our local farmers by making sure that they're people that have do not have the ability to get to whole food. And listen, this is true throughout the city because we're not producing any healthy food other than livestock stuff in our nearby communities. Even when we get vegetables and stuff, they're older than they certainly would be if we were producing the food locally here. So we have to have ways to get food production happening more locally. That's number one. When you do that, you reduce the cost, by the way. And when you reduce the cost because you're not having to do the transport, you're not having to find ways to preserve the foods, and you can get the food faster from the field to the table. And when you do that, you save money. So those are savings we can pass along to the consumer. That has tremendous value. Having our farmers show up, and we are seeing this in our farmers markets locally in Knoxville, which is certainly not a state issue, but we are seeing some of our farmers markets come into areas that people are less likely to have access to healthy food because of not having the transportation or not having literally stores that are carrying food.
But thank you so much for just letting me know how you feel about some of the maybe less hot button issues that are super important to our world.
Absolutely. We have to keep that in our sights. The environment and the destruction of the environment is something that we're contributing to right now in Tennessee. We have so little regulation that we are damaging our aquatic life. We are using a lot of chemicals to undo some of the damage that comes from toxins that get dumped into our waterways. These are things that have a real impact on our lives, and we're going to see that impact more and more as time goes on if we don't put people in office who are willing to make those decisions to say we've got to not be the state with the least amount of regulation, but we want to protect our natural resources. And I appreciate everything that you do to support that and to keep talking about that. And I think that we have the potential to change Tennessee.
Virginia Couch, like many of the candidates we're getting to know, came from a low-income farm background. Even though today she's a lawyer and small business owner, she's aware of the pinch of poverty. Here we cut into a conversation she's having with Jamie Lewis, who recently became a partner in her small business, about how they handled some thorny issues of economic survival and at the same time took care of their workforce. They refused to let the pandemic be an excuse to lay people off.
January of this year, you became an actual partner. You actually bought half the business.
I did. Kind of in an unfortunate time to buy into a business and invest some of your 401k that you had saved. And 3 months into that buy-in was when COVID hit, which was kind of a startling situation.
So what are some of the ways that COVID-19 has affected the business?
Initially, what happened was in the very beginning, people really were really concerned. They panicked. They stopped all of their traveling. Our business is based on people traveling and people working outside of the home. So they need daycare, they need boarding. And at the time that it really hit in late March, early April, we basically went down 70% of our normal numbers, and we were keeping basically an empty facility open.
So during that time, you did keep the staff employed?
We did. We kept them employed the first month of it. We were very, very low on our numbers. Obviously, we did a lot of cleaning. We did a lot of painting. We did a lot of upkeep that, during the busy season we don't have time for, because in the beginning I thought, well, this will be bad for a little bit, and everything will recover and everyone will start traveling again and schools will go back to normal. But after about a month, we realized that it wasn't going to go back to normal, and we were going to have to do something different in order to survive.
And I know we applied for and received funds through the Paycheck Protection Program. which allowed us to keep our staff employed and helped us pay rent and utilities for a few months. But we did, in fact, lay our employees off, at least reduce their work schedule because of the $600 benefit the federal government was providing in connection with unemployment.
Right. The numbers were so low. I needed a couple of employees along with myself, but I had at the time 9 full-time employees. I had to either make a decision to lay 7 off and keep 2 employed with me, and basically not allow them to get that additional funding from the government. So what we opted to do was, to be fair across the board, was we reduced everyone's hours and basically had a sit down on a Sunday in the office, and we helped them all get signed up on unemployment. Because some of the young women had never even really didn't understand unemployment. They didn't know how to get it set up on it or anything. So we made that decision, and we worked them all, what we could. We needed more, but they needed the additional funding from the government. So we just struggled through for a few months.
What things do you think the government could do, state level government could do to help us out here?
I for certain would say more help as far as lease payments, utility payments. A lot of these small companies, small restaurants and all, if they're like us, our 2 top expenses is our lease payment, and it's our overhead or our salaries to the employees. In the beginning, the Paycheck Protection had a different setup as far as they would pay so much for the employee salary and so much for upkeep of the building, lease payments, basically. And they did change that, which made it a bit easier for us. But our lease payment, and I know we're not the only ones in the area that have a really high lease payment, but more help on lease payments for all of these small businesses would help out a lot, in addition to the salaries of the people.
Well,
I mean, just enough to keep going or keep us going.
State of Tennessee has been doing a small business relief program, but our business is not in a category that has been offered assistance yet. So we're hopeful that the state government will reevaluate. They still have a lot of funds left from what the federal relief program provided the state, and maybe they'll see fit to cover all businesses that have been hurt by this and not be so selective in who they're providing relief for. So, well, thank you for joining me today. And thank you for being my partner at Barkside Lodge. And I'll talk to you later.
Here's a song about Mountain's Majesty called State of the Art by Sean McCulloch and the Lone Tones. Plenty of high mountain energy in that banjo playing. Maybe enough to stop mountaintop removal forever.
Drunk the water from the well, grown my food upon this land. But the changes I see coming, they're tearing at my heart. 'Cause there ain't nothing better than the original plan. No, these mountains, they're state of the art. State of the art, state of the art. These changes I see coming, they're tearing at my heart. 'Cause these mountains are state of the art. They come with their drag lines to rip out the coal. They ruin our water, tear our homeland apart. They say they'll put it back better than before. But these mountains are state of the art. State of the art. State of the art. These changes I see coming, they're tearing at my heart. Cause these mountains, they're state of the art. When the trees are all gone and the mountains are flat, guess they'll build some new condos or a bigger Walmart. They say this is progress. I'm not sure about that. 'Cause these mountains, they're state of the art. State of the art. State of the art. These changes I see coming, they're tearing at my heart. 'Cause these mountains are state of the art. State of the art. State of the art. These changes I see coming, they're tearing at my heart. 'Cause these mountains are state of the art.
A key element in Marquita's policy platform is a just transition away from extraction and pollution and toward a clean and renewable energy system. And boy, do we need it. She gets a harrowing analysis here of the impact of mountaintop removal on the mountains of Kentucky and Tennessee and on the lungs of their citizens from Ann League, the executive director of the statewide Organization for Community Empowerment, or SOCM. They got together on a windy day at Suttrie's Landing.
Hi, this is Marquita Bradshaw, candidate for United States Senate, the Democratic nominee here in the great state of Tennessee. I am here. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Certainly. My name is Ann League. I am with SOCM, which is Statewide Organizing for Community Empowerment, a community organizing group here in Tennessee.
Today you are here as an individual talking to me about some of the environmental justice issues that you have seen across the state when it comes to mountaintop removal. And I have some questions. I'm ready.
All righty.
All right. And so, can you describe the process of mountaintop removal in the simplest terms and what kind of impacts it have on water, soil, and air?
Mountaintop removal in the simplest terms, back in the old days when people thought of coal mining, they thought about digging into the mountain to get the coal. Mountaintop removal is taking the mountain away to get to the coal. They actually blow up the tops of the mountains to get to the seams of coal. The impacts upon the environment and the communities that are surrounded by mountaintop removal are huge and many. One of the biggest impacts is to water quality, because most of the streams start in the mountains. They start as little trickles and springs. So when you blow up the top of a mountain, you destroy those springs and the starts and the headwaters of all the springs and streams and rivers here in Appalachia. There's also a lot of dust that's involved when you use the high explosives. So people who live near mountaintop removal sites and the workers who work on the mountaintop removal sites are exposed to a lot of minuscule particles that get into their lungs, and in some cases it comes out with a lot of black lung. There's something called rock lung. If the coal is in a lot of silica-based strata, when you blow up that silica and then inhale it, and the moisture in your lungs actually turns that into concrete. So there are people who are living in mountaintop removal communities, or the workers on the sites have something called rock lung. There are people who live next to sites that have their houses actually blown off the foundations because of the impact from the high explosives that are used on sites. You find mountaintop removal sites, and coal mining sites in particular, usually are in rural, low-income areas where people are fairly remote, and they don't have a lot of people who are standing up for themselves. They look at this as something that they just have to get used to and live with, and that's something that I didn't believe in, because I started with this. A mountaintop removal site went in next to my home, and 3 months after the mining started, my well water turned bright orange. And in Tennessee, bright orange is a good color, but not when it's your water.
It's certainly not a good look for water at all.
No, it's not good when you wake up and your pillowcase is orange from your hair.
Oh, wow. So what does a just transition look like for communities like this?
A just transition is moving away from an extractive industry and bringing in, or giving the people the means and the tools to have a sustainable income. A lot of these areas are remote, so you can't expect a factory or a big development to come in. So a lot of it is training. It's teaching these people how to pivot to something else. A lot of the jobs that are on mountaintop removal sites are jobs that can be moved and are applicable to something else, because they're truck driving jobs, they're electrician jobs, they're carpentry jobs. So giving the folks who live on there something else to work on, because they have the skills, they have the will to work. This is something that they're generations of mountain people that they pride themselves in being able to work and wanting to work. Just giving them the opportunities to use those skills on something that's not blowing up their backyard.
So this is about having jobs that they don't have to sacrifice their communities in order to be able to make a living. And also, I hear educational opportunities. I hear access to medical care that actually specialize in environmental induced diseases, like you talked to about the respiratory illnesses that people hear. And I also hear you say just the need for more education. And you mentioned that some people might need to be moved away.
No.
Okay, so I just want to make sure some people are not looking for relocation. They want to stay in place, and they want their communities to be remediated to the point where they're safely.
They want to have their communities to have all the opportunities that other communities, that urban communities have. You talked about health care. Rural hospitals in Tennessee are closing. It seems like every week there's a rural hospital closing. It's not just environmental health, it's depression and mental health with folks who are seeing that the jobs are going away and nothing coming in. So it's actually getting them the funding to help change these communities. One of the things that was put into place to help mitigate some of the mining is called the Abandoned Mine Lands Fund, which there are about $2.5 billion in this fund, which should be coming back to mining communities to help fix those communities, fix the lands. The Office of Surface Mining Reclamation and Enforcement takes a very laser view of what the Abandoned Mine Lands Fund can be used for. They broaden that view, and it would be able to be used for education and economic stability instead of just fixing the land itself. I think that would go a long way to helping these communities. There's a federal bill right now called the Reclaim Act, which would help bring some opportunities into these rural mining communities that just passed the House actually in July, and we're hoping that we'll have some success in the Senate coming up eventually.
Well, we have to make sure that people elect the right people.
Absolutely.
Up and down the ballot. Not a shameless plug, but That's the importance of making sure that working people have representation. And thank you so much. My name is Marquita Bradshaw, and I'm the Democratic nominee for United States Senate.
Just transition needs a fresh definition for every situation. It means helping the land recover. It means training the workers in polluting industries to work in new industries. And it means bringing new employment opportunities to areas abandoned by polluters. And especially it means bringing people from blighted communities into the conversation. But most importantly, it means bringing Medicaid expansion to our state, so rural hospitals can open and medical care is not always tied to a job. Hyperpartisanship has robbed Tennessee of many of its medical resources, and here Katie Allison and Elizabeth Rowland unpack the policy we'll need to get Tennessee healthy again.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Rowland, and I'm a candidate for Tennessee State House District 16. That covers the communities of Fountain City, High School, Powell, and Halls. I am here today to let you know why I am a big supporter of Medicaid expansion. And I'm joined here today with Katie Allison. She is a fellow Knoxvillian who has very personal reasons why she also supports Medicaid expansion.
Yeah. Elizabeth, thank you so much for having me join this important conversation. I know that as our future legislator for House District 16, you have some strong legislative advocacy issues that you're going to talk to us about tonight. But I really appreciate you giving me the chance to talk about why Medicaid expansion is personally important to me. But first, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Medicaid expansion actually means?
Sure. Well, Medicaid expansion is, we've already paid federal tax dollars to expand Medicaid. And all we have to do is to apply back to the federal government to get those funds sent back to us so we can get more Tennesseans covered with health insurance. Right now, 1 in 10 Tennesseans has no health care coverage. And if we expand Medicaid, that will help get a good chunk of those people covered. Now, the Medicaid expansion includes the people that make too much money to get covered under Medicaid as it is currently in Tennessee, but too little money to get covered with subsidies under healthcare.gov. So that donut hole there will get totally covered with Medicaid expansion. And in that donut hole includes many of the essential workers that we're relying on right now during this pandemic. And many of those essential workers don't get health insurance through their jobs, and therefore they can't afford the cost of going to see the doctor because they don't have coverage. And that is a big reason why I feel very strongly that we need to expand Medicaid and expand it now during this pandemic, because that should be a first line response to making sure that Tennesseans are health and safe during this pandemic.
And those are all such important reasons. And, you know, I agree with you in terms of advocacy and legislative work on all of those reasons. Let me tell you a little bit about why expansion is personally important to me. A lot of folks have heard about the opioid overdose epidemic. To me, it's very personal. I lost my teenage son, Henry, to an opioid overdose. And right now we're losing over 1,300 Tennesseans a year to opioid overdose. That's more than we lose to gun violence, auto accidents, or any other kind of accidental death. In Knox County, we're already on track this year to lose about 360 people to overdose. So we obviously have an epidemic, and my son was a victim of that epidemic. States that have expanded Medicaid have a 6% lower overdose rate. And when you think about how many people we're losing, that's very substantial. Additionally, Medicaid nationally is the #1 way that people are able to afford addiction treatment at all. And right now, many people in Tennessee can't afford addiction treatment because they simply don't have health coverage. And that's a big reason why we're losing so many people to this terrible epidemic. And again, you know, that's obviously a very personal reason for me. But why don't you tell us a little bit why, as our state legislator for House District 16, you support Medicaid expansion as being good for the state in general?
Yes, well, first of all, I'm really sorry for your loss. And I know that so many families, too many families have to go through that in our country and in our state, in our community right here. And expanding Medicaid is one step in that process of bringing those deaths down. There's other reasons to support Medicaid expansion as well. In Tennessee, we have a real problem with rural hospital closures. Tennessee has one of the highest rates of rural hospital closures in the whole country. And expanding Medicaid will help with that, because many of those hospitals find themselves in difficult financial straits due to uncompensated care that they have to give to uninsured patients. So that is a big reason for Tennessee specifically to expand Medicaid. Another reason is that, Tennessee is only one of 13 states that has not expanded Medicaid. And states like California and New York and our neighbor Kentucky, I'm told, has expanded Medicaid, and they're benefiting from our federal tax dollars. It just makes economic sense for Tennessee to bring that money back home. Medicaid expansion is increasingly a bipartisan issue. There are quite a few Republicans that support it, as well as Democrats. Knoxville's very own Senator Richard Briggs, who is also a physician, is in support of Medicaid expansion and has in fact sponsored a bill in the legislature to expand Medicaid. Senator Bill Frist, former US Senator Bill Frist, who's also a doctor, supports Medicaid expansion. We should listen to our doctors, and we should expand Medicaid as soon as possible. Let's get it done.
Yes, and Elizabeth, I so appreciate you letting me be part of this conversation, because I feel like Medicaid expansion is really one of the most important and pressing issues facing our state right now. Tennessee ranks near the lowest in so many categories of healthcare, diabetes, cancer, so many different conditions that preventable care would make a big difference. And when you can't even afford to see the doctor for your most basic illness, particularly during a pandemic, the idea of expanding healthcare coverage to as many Tennesseans as possible just makes good sense. So I'm so glad that as our future House legislator for District 16, that this issue is such a big priority for you.
Yes, I totally agree with you, Katie. Medicaid expansion is not only the right thing to do for Tennessee residents' health, it's the smart thing to do for Tennessee's economic health. We need to expand Medicaid now. And I'd love to hear from all of the folks listening to this conversation. Please check out my website, voteelizabethrowland.com. Send me a message. You can also find us on social media. And I'd love to hear from you and any stories you might have about why you think Medicaid expansion should happen. And I'd love to have your support on November 3rd with this election. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I really appreciated being part of the conversation.
Yeah, thank you for joining me, Katie. And thank you to all of the folks that are participating and listening with us today.
Now, as promised, we have the second part of the conversation with Sam McKenzie and David Hayes. In the first part, the conversation ranged from budgets passed during McKenzie's time on the Knox County Commission to a critique of the sheriff's office to a historical analysis of policing in America. Here we continue, as the topic of policing and the Black community leads to a critical discussion of private prisons. Now, both men have agreed to let us distribute the complete conversation publicly. We'll have a link on the Harvey Broom Group webpage and send it around next week.
In Appalachia, we see the forces on the side of coal miners, on coal miner companies, for instance, or mining companies. They created police forces to manage the workers, right? So these workers wouldn't go on strike and ask for more money, right? Police forces were created to manage and control them, right? If you look at the history of policing just in general in Western society, we look at England, right? Police were made to control people who were poor. It was like poor people policing other poor people. You weren't created to go see what the rich people were doing, right? Police have a very distinct role in our society, right? And then we got to look at the impact right? And look in the in-picture makeup. It's like, okay, that's how it started. Maybe since then it's changed. Like, no, like during the lynching era, right? Police was fully involved with lynching, right? When it came to voting rights and all that, police were on the side of keeping us from voting, right? The reason why a lot of Black people in the South wanted to vote so much is so they could vote for different people, for their sheriffs and police, right? Or to vote to get rid of it, right? But like, that's how policing has been, right? You can only say that policing has been okay for the Black community since like what, maybe the 70s, right? Since the civil rights legislation, like maybe that. But even since then, right, we see that every 28 hours, a Black person is killed by police or vigilante, right? Every 28 hours, probably more than that. The Malcolm X grassroots movement did that research a few years ago. And honestly, it's probably closer to every 28 hours one of us is killed by a person with a badge or a person who might as well have a vigilante, a security guard, or a deputized person, something, right? We see that overwhelmingly police forces don't reflect us, right? We're not in it. We don't even, the only places where there's majority Black forces, places where there's a majority Black community. Outside of that, we hardly have any representation. We hardly have any representation at the top of these institutions, right? We see that the laws that these police are making and policies that they abide by, Black people have no input in making them, right? It's just pressed upon us. We have no input in actually saying what the police policies are and how they should act and how they should be held accountable, right? We see that they're repeatedly able to kill us without anything happening to them over and over again, right? We see a culture of that's being able to do whatever they want to do, right? And nothing happening, right? So when you look at this institution, you got to wonder, like, is it reformable, right? You got to wonder, like, is the problem is not funded enough? Is the problem that has the problem that has not enough resources? Because if we remember, no matter where you are, the police and sheriffs occupy the biggest chunk of the budget. That's where most of the money is going, right? Now, I understand the politics of the situation. I don't expect you to say, yes, I believe to defund the police. I don't expect that of you, right? But I think what we can align on, where we can agree on, is the need to create alternative institutions, right? Saying that there's been too much money to police, throwing more money at police isn't going to help. Maybe reallocating, right? Maybe if we lower the number of police officers, increase the training, and instead of hiring more police officers, we hired mental health professionals. We have more money going to anti-poverty programs and substance misuse programs, you know what I mean? That would actually be helpful. So I hope that we can find that, we can be able to agree on the need for alternative institutions, funding those, and not just focusing on funding the police more.
Yes. In my mind, it starts at the top, and I'm going to call the top on this one, and it's an arbitrary top, but the top of this system that we've created in the state of Tennessee starts with private prisons. One of the biggest mistakes we made, I know it's done under Democratic leadership, was to create the privatized prisons. What that does is you get paid by the number of prisoners that you have under your control. So it becomes a numbers game. It becomes a money game. And it becomes now they have a strong pack and they can, I won't say buy votes, but they can definitely influence legislation. And you've made a couple of millionaires out of politicians in that process. So that coupled with sentencing guidelines, which are exorbitant, it packs the prison, and it's a hugely negative, and it trickles down to the local level. Well, I don't know if it's still the case, but during the time I was on the county commission, we got a monthly report on the number of prisoners that were at the penal farm, because there was a lawsuit that said you guys are just stacking them. You're all just stacking them in there more and more and more and more, because you're getting paid by the prisoner by the day, and you're sending them up to the state. And if the state's full, they're going to pay you money, extra money, to keep them there. So it becomes a vicious cycle. And, I won't say the sheriff, but the law enforcement community, everybody's benefiting from there, except the constituents that are there for nonviolent offense, that are there way too long, that are being targeted to fill these systems up. So I think from a state standpoint, that's where we start. We start with deprivatizing. Prisons are a burden. prisons aren't a profit center. Prisons are the last alternative for law enforcement, in my mind. There's nothing else outside of prison, because that is the worst thing that you can do. So the best thing you could do is deal with the problem at its lowest level. Again, from a state standpoint, we need to deprivatize prisons, pass legislation to make those nonviolent offenses minimal, if at all. And I think that's a start. So that takes away a lot of the push to fill these prisons up.
Yeah, it's good to hear your criticism of private prisons as well. Yeah, but I think also you gotta take a stance on policing, right, and policing alternatives as well, because that is going to come up in the state house, right? Especially now, they're going to pass blue lives matter. I was listening to an interview you were talking about before, and you were critiquing a law that they passed trying to criminalize protesters. They're like, the FOP is very powerful at the state level. The police interest, and they don't even need to be, right? Like, it's just the right position is support law enforcement doing whatever they want to do, even if it's killing us, right? So you gotta, so I think we gotta be able to trust you to fight back against that, right? And to say we need alternatives.
Well, we've done what smart citizens are supposed to do. We've concentrated on the candidates who can really make a difference in our lives, the local ones. And when we mobilize our neighbors to vote for the people we met tonight, we help the top of the ticket as well. I'm proud to tell you that the Sierra Club endorses Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. It's true that Joe doesn't like to call his climate plan the Green New Deal, but this ticket is the strongest ever for proposed climate action, according to Ramon Cruz, the Sierra Club's president. A vote for Joe and Kamala is a vote for Black lives, LGBT rights, a woman's right to choose. It's a vote for student loan forgiveness, the public option, and expanding the Affordable Care Act. So thank you for joining us tonight and for being a citizen in this very challenging campaign season. The pandemic may be isolating us, but tonight, imagination and technology brought us together. More than any other time I can remember, these candidates are helping each other and lifting up each other's campaigns. This mutual support system, I think, shows the influence of the women's movement. It gets us all pulling together toward a shared vision of a livable future. Tonight's event is our way of pulling more people into that shared vision and, of course, getting them to the polls. So please help us out with that one. Vote and bring 3 friends with you. I'm Kent Minot, and I volunteer with the Sierra Club. Now, enjoy the music of Tennessee residents and national treasures Sparky and Rhonda Rucker as they close us out with a reminder to keep our eyes on the prize.
Silas, they were bound in jail, had no money for to go their bail. Keep your eyes on the prize, hold on. Hold on. Silas, they began to shout. Jail doors open and they walked out. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. In the wilderness a day too long. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. That we did right was the day we started to fight. Your eyes brothers and sisters walking hand